Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our national Zoom this morning. We've got people from across Australia and from New Zealand, so welcome to everyone, and we look forward to this really interesting event. So I'll call on Judy now for acknowledgement of country and the prayer.
Thank you, Sharon, and up the acknowledgement of country. As we enter into this sacred space and time, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands where we are meeting today. Their footsteps were here long before our shoe prints. Their handprints were here centuries before our buildings rose. Their hearts loved and broke in this country, generations before our violence, settlements, and sorrows. Their cultural authority and traditions were established long before our communities of relationships and leadership came to be. May we walk humbly in this knowledge, in this place where many years ago the word of life found a home. And our prayer today is a prayer we'll recognise in the Magnificat, a Magnificat for itinerancy, which seems to be where we also, as religious congregations, can find ourselves. My soul is filled to its very depth with the wonder of your faithful and loving presence, O my God. Constant is your presence in our lives, O faithful one. You entrust us with the gift of life. You love us into loving. You believe us into believing in ourselves and in you. You walk with us wherever we go. Our journey takes us to a place that is new, to a future unfolding. All of us are here. All of us are ready. Holy is this work you have begun in us. Blessed are the steps we take, because you take them with us. Blessed are those who, prepared, have the courage to continue the journey begun. Blessed are you, O faithful one, the enabler of deeds great and small for those who believe in you. You show us the power of people with a clear commitment. You scatter the energies of those who vacillate. You are here now, O Holy One, for the work of these times, mindful of your coming newness, according to the traditions of your searching people. Mindful of the continuing newness of each one of us, we come with open minds to accomplish the work of a future unfolding. O Holy One, you bless us with your presence from age to age. Glory to you, source of all being, eternal Word and Holy Spirit, now and forever. Amen.
Thank you, Judy, very much. Could I ask the people who've just joined during the prayer to please mute yourselves? And we'll be looking at a speaker view. Thank you. So this morning, just a little background to why we're having a Zoom about the ministry of canonical delegates and consultors. Last year, we were working in the CD network, which Peter's going to say a few words about in a moment. And some of the people in that network suggested it would be a good time to really talk to everyone about the ministry of a CD, of a canonical delegate and consultors. You know, very often we think this might be a sort of transactional moment rather than a real ministry evolving in religious life in Australia and in the church in Australia and New Zealand as well. So this morning we thought it would be really an opportune moment to ask some of the people from our network, some already working as canonical delegates and consultors, others ready to work as canonical delegates and consultors, and congregational leaders who sent a petition to Rome to appoint a canonical delegate and consultors. So those people are going to speak from their own personal knowledge and experience this morning. So we think this will be a really great Zoom. Thanks, Peter.
Thanks, Sharon. So I'm Peter Kranko, and I'm the organizational consultant to Emerging Futures, and I'm going to briefly introduce the Canonical Delegate Network, which is a network that is facilitated by EFCL. So the purpose of the network is to build capacity to offer sustainable, appropriate canonical governance to Emerging Futures collaboratives, service partners, and building capacity that's this role is something we're all learning about and living into, and hence the group comes together to find its way and live into this new model together. Who's in the Canonical Delegate Network at the moment? There are two who are currently in that role for three religious institutes, so two canonical delegates. There's one person who's in petitions that have been lodged to Rome, as well as a small group of religious who are available and or interested in the role, as well as other colleagues, and it is supported by Emerging Futures. What's the objectives of the network? Well, as I said, it's in the context. So that first objective, to work within the frameworks of co-design and transformative change, and that's really about the living into and the learning together, to foster a sustainable model, succession planning, regarding the provision of canonical governance to religious institutes in transition, informing and supporting Emerging Futures advocacy to relevant church bodies about canonical governance for groups in transition, contributing to a deepening understanding of the role, and providing a structure where canonical delegates or people who are interested in being canonical delegates can come together and offer and access support and advice, offering formation. And then that next one is really about beginning to develop the tools and frameworks. So as we live into it, we are working together to develop guidelines such as role descriptions, policies, processes, really the practical side of actually how does this new model work and what are the sorts of documents we need. And in that context, developing a deep understanding of the relationship between the canonical delegate and the religious institute, because of course that's another issue we really need to understand, and understanding the Emerging Futures model from the religious institute's perspective. What are their needs? What is their understanding of their needs as they let go of the leadership team model? So I'll leave it at that. And I'm going to hand over to Mary Fransman.
Right, I'm Mary Fransman, the congregation leader of the Presentation Sisters in Queensland. And what I'm going to talk about is the process that we went through to decide on a canonical delegate. So the mandate given to the leadership team at our 2019 chapter, when we were aware that very near in the future we would not have the capacity to elect a new leadership team, was to continue exploring possibilities for future canonical governance that are relevant and appropriate for our congregation. So we engaged EFCL in 2021 for the express purpose of petitioning DICOCEL, the Dicastery in Rome for Institutes of Consecrated Life, for a canonical delegate. The EFCL transition team helped us to transition from a leadership team model to canonical governance by a canonical delegate and consultors. During this time, 2021 to 2024, two other presentation congregations, Lismore and Wagga, were on the same journey. Tasmania had been granted a canonical delegate in 2021. It was suggested at our society presentation meetings under the leadership of Anne Lane that each congregation would petition for the same canonical delegate. The leaders met with Bernadette Fitzgerald, Little Company of Mary, at a society meeting where our expectations of her and her expectations of us were tabled and discussed. There was unanimous agreement that Bernadette was the right fit. Thus began a process by each of these three congregations to discern whether the proposed canonical delegate was a good fit for them. So I'm just going to talk about our process. So EFCL had guided us in developing documents which would be essential when the transition to the new governance model was to take place. And we spent a number of years developing the documents, our spiritual patrimony, our living will, our distribution plan, and decision-making. These documents were to guide our sisters and our service providers into the future. In working toward the discernment of our canonical delegate, one society had promoted the idea that Bernadette may accept being the canonical delegate for each of our congregations. Bernadette met with the Queensland leadership team and then held an informal meeting with the sisters in small groups. This was a time for the sisters to get to know a little bit about her and for her to get to know something of our congregation. The role of the canonical delegate was explained, and it is to be the congregation's canonical trustee, representing it and protecting its interests on canonical and civil matters, to ensure the care and well-being of the sisters, and to ensure compliance with sisters' requirements and stated wishes with reference to the congregation's constitution, living will, distribution plan, and universal law. The canonical delegate relies on EFCL to ensure all of these requirements are met. So we held a formal meeting in November 2023, and Bernadette was invited to this gathering to progress the discernment process. Prior to this meeting in October 2023, the sisters were invited to meet in their smaller cluster groups to share their reflections on the role description of the commissary, the canonical delegate. So each sister received a copy of a leaflet, and I've got that here. If anybody wants that, I'm happy to share that with you. And what this leaflet contained was the sisters were asked to consider what does the role of the canonical delegate mean for us, and what are my expectations of how the canonical delegate will fulfill this role. And there was also an opportunity for Bernadette to express her expectations of the role and her expectations of us. So they were asked to bring their reflections to the gathering on the 4th of November. And as each cluster group delivered their feedback, Bernadette gave feedback after each group spoke rather than waiting for the end. There was overwhelming support for Bernadette and the role of the canonical delegate. In a letter to Bernadette following the gathering, I wrote, "The purpose of the meeting was to gain a mutual understanding of how the role of canonical delegate could work for each of us. It was an informal getting to know each other meeting. It was obvious during that meeting that there was an easy rapport between you and the sisters. The image of the midwife that you spoke about as being part of your past ministry really resonated with the sisters as we birth a new future." Following the meeting, as each sister spoke of the experience of meeting you, it was unanimously agreed that they would support and endorse you as the proposed canonical delegate. However, discernment will continue into early 2024. As we continue to discern, a two-way process, I would like to invite you to meet with the leadership team and Sandy, our business manager, who has been appointed the go-to person or conduit for our employees to the EFCL transition team, and that meeting was held in January 2024. I look forward to continuing and deepening our discernment of the role of canonical delegate. We consider ourselves so fortunate and blessed to have you as our proposed canonical delegate. I believe it gives us more confidence that we can look forward to a future full of hope. And then when Bernadette came to Brisbane to meet with the staff in early 2024, she took the opportunity to once again meet with the sisters in their small groups. Bernadette attended our final chapter in July 2024, where the 29 chapter delegates unanimously responded to the following two questions. And these are the questions. This chapter hereby resolves to submit a petition to the Holy See, which is the ecclesial authority of the Presentation Sisters Queensland, to request the appointment of a commissary to replace the elected congregational leadership and to perform the role of the Supreme Moderator, Major Superior, of the Presentation Sisters Queensland. And secondly, recommend the appointment of Sister Bernadette Fitzgerald, LCM, to the position of commissary. And the petition was sent to the dicastery in August, and we are awaiting their decision. We did get a bit of feedback, and they asked us, because after a chapter you have 6 months, the leadership can extend to 6 months before you've got to apply to Rome. In the letter which I sent to them saying that our time was running out, we hadn't got a response. They wrote back to say, we would like you to extend your leadership for the next 2 months. So we're waiting, and we will have a decision by the 31st of March. So thank you.
Thanks, Mary. I'm Bernadette Fitzgerald. As Mary said, have been on a journey of discernment with a number of congregations of the Presentation Spirit. And so when I share my experience, I've blended some of the experiences together. So I'm not speaking individually about a particular congregation. Like any discernment, it's a matter of weighing facts and feelings, and it takes time to explore both. The journey of exploration is guided by a document developed by the CD network through sharing practical experience, applied governance knowledge, but most importantly, deep respect for this time in the life of a congregation. I'd also add recognition of what this consideration means for a potential CD. The Canonical Delegate Mutual Discernment Checklist, the wording doesn't do it justice. In reality, it's a 4-page map for the discernment pathway, containing 13 elements at this point, or signposts, that need to be explored before making any decision to be available. To give an overview, I've taken a sampler approach and chosen just some of the signposts to show that the journey of discernment is thorough, practical, comprehensive, but most importantly, it's relational. The 3 I've chosen to focus on are the Religious Institute, the most important one, EFCL, and governance. And the facts are on the slides for you to read. But I'd like to speak to my experience. When I was first asked to think about this ministry, I was curious. It was new, it was unknown, it was exciting, and that made it appealing to me. I met with congregational leadership for them to get a feel for me and me for them. In sharing story and spirit, I learnt more about who they were and how they hoped to live their lives into fulfilment of their mission. I went home gifted with significant background reading and a sense of wondering. When the invitation came from the leadership to meet the sisters of the congregation, I felt ready to meet the sisters despite my many questions, or perhaps because of them. It was an essential short meet and greet to see if the sisters had an initial sense that I might fit their needs, their life, and vice versa. But it was not till a subsequent meeting I felt I had a sense of the sisters, and I'd like to emphasise the word sense. I don't claim I know the sisters of any of the congregations in terms of deep knowledge. I don't come from that particular charism family. I don't stand now or in the future, should I go forward as a canonical delegate, in that unique religious institute space, nor should I. The whole point is to enable the space to be there for the sisters. So it's really important that the potential CD recognises and accepts that he or she is other and always will be. I felt a real energy and excitement after those meetings, a sense of connection. But as the discernment began in earnest, I also felt overwhelmed. I was concerned about how the sisters' wishes would be honoured, how governance oversight would actually happen, and significant confusion about the civil situation, with it being different in the particular civil structure chosen to meet the needs of a religious institute. The canonical responsibilities I thought I understood, sort of, but it's a new understanding in this role. So Peter, thanks. We'll go to the second slide. While EFCL provides for a potential CD, is firstly a space for learning. The emphasis on thinking and acting beyond old ways of congregational leadership, the challenge to be part of shaping the new wineskins for the new wine of congregational life as it ages, all contribute to beginning to feel able for this ministry. It is EFCL, its staff, its service provision, its process and its structure, which enables the CD to maintain high-level governance oversight, and I emphasise that word, through those services. So the potential CD must understand and respect the service provision model and staffing that EFCL and the Religious Institute have chosen for their circumstances. As Mary said, the transition plan and essential documents create the foundation that empowers the congregation to maintain its life and authority for spirit and mission. It also assists EFCL and its staff to support that. They are practical, grounded in the unique reality of the particular religious institute. And it's the CD's role to ensure those living documents remain as a guide as the journey continues. So they are essential reading. They belong to the congregation, and some of them might change. So it's understanding that as well. As a potential canonical delegate, I've deeply appreciated the knowledge and support of the EFCL transition team and the network. Together, we explore the transition process and the CD role and boundaries so that they're clear and hopefully embedded in understanding. It is EFCL and the network that helped me move on from being overwhelmed. The last signpost is that of governance. The discernment document invited me to really think about the how of civil and canonical responsibility. I think canonical governance will and must evolve. It's about the life of the religious institute within the life of the church, and life is dynamic. I think you have to be comfortable with that. I think you have to be comfortable that there will always be a sense of perhaps an element of unknowing. The board or the stewardship committee and the staff of the Religious Institute manage on a governance mode and on a daily way, the assets, both finance and property, to support the life of the sisters. Confidence in those structures and processes and assuring oneself the right people are in place is essential. If you don't take time to do that in the discernment phase, the risk is you will try and do it once the transition has been made. And if you do, you'll cross the boundary from governance oversight to practical governance. That risks intruding into the congregational space inappropriately. So meeting members of board and committee and staff before accepting the final invitation to be considered is essential. I hope that's given a little insight into my discernment journey for the Ministry of Canonical Delegate. There is wonder, confusion, reassurance, anxiety, and anticipation. But participation, even in the discernment journey with a religious institute, no matter the outcome, is a privilege. Thank you, and I'll hand over to Maria.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Maria Lazaro, and I'm a member of the Presentation Sisters Victoria and have been for 50 plus years. Up until now, my ministry has mainly been focused around education, and I've had several opportunities to be called to congregation leadership as well. So I'm currently the canonical delegate or commissary for 2 congregations who recognised that as their members were ageing and their numbers were diminishing and the pool of people available for and capable of leadership was growing significantly smaller, that they recognised that they needed to take a step towards a new structure. And to this end, both congregations set about working with EFCL to see what they might need into the future to ensure the well-being of their sisters and the furthering of their mission until the last member dies. As you can imagine, this was a lengthy process and involved much consultation and great deal of work. And as has already been indicated by previous speakers, integral to this process was the discernment towards finding a canonical delegate whose role was and is to exercise canonical and civil responsibilities for their religious institutes. As a canonical delegate, I have been appointed by the ecclesial authority for both groups. So the first group for whom I'm a canonical delegate is Presentation Sisters Tasmania. They are a pontifical group, and so therefore I was appointed by the dicastery in Rome. The second group for whom I am the canonical delegate are the Missionary Franciscan Sisters of the Immaculate Conception, and I was appointed by their international congregation leader. In my role as canonical delegate, I've come to recognise that this is not about being a leader in a new structure, and the role is not one of leadership. I work with 2 consultors who support me in my role for each group. and they are not consultors for the congregation, and together we do not form a leadership group as such. However, I would say that my experience of being in leadership has been invaluable. But moving into this role also necessitated some changing of some of my mindsets, making some internal shifts, and always remembering that and respecting that the authority and the agency belongs in the group and not in me. Part of the process, as has been indicated too, has been that each congregation needed to name their unique spirit and charism and to develop ongoing processes for this to be shared with me. As I'm part of the presentation family, understanding that for Presentation Sisters Tasmania, somewhat of a different task to understanding that for the Missionary Franciscan Sisters. But one of the things I do recognise that although there are differences, at heart, we are all women of the gospel, and that's what links us. And that was also what enabled me to say my yes. The role that I have undertaken is not a hands-on role. However, but I am growing in my understanding that it is most definitely a ministry. It's a new one in new times, and that's what I'm called to now. It is so much more than performing functions for a congregation. The development of relationships has been crucial in building mutual trust, confidence, as well as efficiency of service. In both groups, or for both groups, it involves my visiting the congregations several times a year and also engaging with them either via email, phone, text, whatever. As a canonical delegate, I have learnt that it's really important for me to know and understand each of these groups and to be known and to be understood, to be committed to learning, to listening, to questioning, to consult within the group and beyond. And it is all about the sisters in both groups being able to live their lives as fully and with as much care as possible, and ensuring that the mission and the legacy arrangements that they have decided upon are carried out until the last sister dies. The canonical delegate role is also about holding with care and due diligence the canonical and civil affairs of the congregation. Whilst the essentials in both groups are core, there are different mechanisms in them in place for this to happen for each group. So some of my tasks include oversight and signing off on annual finances, approving the purchase or sale of property. I'm a member of the Presentation Sister Tasmanian Board, and I work with the Stewardship Council and the business manager for the Missionary Franciscan Sisters. It is also important for me to ensure that the safeguarding and professional standards matters are in hand, and as such, I work with the relevant processes and personnel in place for each group. It has been an enormous help to me to be able to work with the EFCL to ensure the appropriate services are in place for the sisters and their ministries, and to develop relationships with key staff. But my role is not one of management. And sometimes my role also includes being a voice for the group or a member if and when necessary. Integral to moving with this process for me has been recognising and actualising that the agency for the congregation's life belongs in the group. The processes for both congregations and EFCL has been an evolving one. We have journeyed together in exploration, deep reflection. There has been much conversation towards the establishment of relevant protocols and practices, and one size does not fit all. It has been important to recognise the non-negotiables, to be clear about accountabilities and responsibilities, which need to be identified and then established within each group. A significant part of the work that has been undertaken by EFCL on behalf of congregations is the establishment of the Canonical Delegate Network. Peter referred to that earlier. Our considerations as part of that group have included exploring the various roles within the EFCL structure, looking at letters of engagement, canonical requirements, policies and guidelines, CD discernment checklists, and the like. A significant part also of that has been reflecting together on current thinking in these times of transition and movement towards completion. Because it is a journey, and although we have certainly have some details in place, we are also learning along the way. In my role and as part of that network, I have really valued the ways that we can think and work together in this evolving ministry. I've valued being able to listen to the needs of the congregation, such different challenges and the diminishment of capacity. I appreciate the work we've been able to achieve together to identify the required dimensions and responsibilities of the role. I think I have grown in my capacity and understanding of what it means to exercise due diligence. I've certainly appreciated the place to ask questions. And more than anything, I think I have appreciated deepening my sense of ministry as together we journey in these times for religious life that are like no others, a journey that we take today and into the future. So thank you, everyone.
Oh, hello, everyone. Thanks very much, Maria. My name's Kath Bartlow, and I was asked to talk about why I have accepted the role to be a consultant for the Presentation Sisters, even though that is still in process. Sharon suggested I talk about why I said yes, some of my background, and what I see as the role as a consultant. So I was very humbled to be asked to be a consultant. The Queensland Presentation Sisters have been core to my formation and development. And I was a member of the Prezies in Queensland for 12 years during my 20s and early 30s. So I lived and worked in community as a teacher with women very committed to the mission of Canonical and values, the values of compassion and hospitality, simplicity and justice. I witnessed their work and worked alongside them in supporting disadvantaged young people and their families in an attempt to break cycles of poverty through education. And I have great gratitude for those experiences and development. They certainly formed who I am as a lay person today. So I do view the role, being asked to be in the role, as a privilege and a great trust as the Presentation Sisters progress to the next phase, and as they now start to appoint custodians to ensure their tradition and their rich mission continues. The role certainly provides an opportunity to give back. I just had the pleasure of being in Longreach over the last weekend to celebrate the 125 years of the Presentation Sisters in Queensland, and that celebration and recognition certainly really was public about the tenacity, commitment, and great achievements of what the Presentation Sisters have given to Queensland over the last 125 years. So a bit about my background, besides what I've told you so far, that I think helps me to accept this role is my experience as a Presentation Sister did lead me to work in Logan City, which is just south of Brisbane. And I worked there as a Presentation Sister for 6 years in an Edmund Rice Flexi School, but lived in community with other Presentation Sisters in Woodridge. And after leaving, I went on to work at Youth and Family Service in Logan for nearly 30 years, and it was an organisation that worked with disadvantaged people to improve their lives, people who were in poverty, homelessness, some domestic and family violence, people who are unemployed. We were able to initiate a social enterprise and generate jobs and assist people in a variety of ways to try and break their cycles of poverty. As a layperson, I've been able in my own way to continue that mission of Canonical. I've also in recent times completed a company director's course, so I have an understanding of good governance. Not that I need that for the role of consultor, but it certainly has really firmed up for me the importance of having good governance in every structure. And currently I'm a trustee and a board director at Mercy Partners, PJP. So the connection with the Presentation Sisters as well as other congregations live on. But under Mercy Partners are the Presentation Schools of St Rita's and St Ursula's. And certainly, as you'd know from a PJP, the importance of continuing the Catholic identity, the gospel values of Jesus, and the charism and spirit of Canonical, as well as the charism of the other congregations linked to Mercy Partners. What I think is in the role, and it has taken me some time, we've been fortunate to be able to meet with Bernadette on about 3 occasions and to also unpack what this role will mean. And like Maria said, it's not being part of a leadership team. And sometimes I know some of the sisters who I've known for many years would have thought that. But to me, the core part of the role is to support and be a sounding board for the Canonical Delegate, to ensure that the sisters' well-being, their wishes, that they have documented well and the needs of the sisters are met. It certainly supports the canonical responsibility and that the canonical and civil responsibilities are met. And it certainly is to support and ensure that the mission is at the heart of governance and support. And one of the documents that at our last meeting in November last year we were able to look at, which was made it really clear, because there are so many parts, and that was something new for me to learn, is to see the importance and to recognise the role of the many different partners as we go forward. So Bernadette had developed a matrix along with the presentation leaders and the company of this is what a canonical delegate would be really responsible for. This is what the company of the Queensland Presentation Sisters, and in other states there'll be different groups, is responsible for. This is what EFCL is responsible for. That really helped me think further about what was unique in the role I was going to take on, and that it really was one of supporting the canonical delegate. I think that's the main things I need to share. So I'm happy to hand over to Nola and let Nola go further about the ministry of being a consultant. Thanks, Nola.
Thanks very much, Kath. Can you hear me? Yeah. Thanks very much, Kath. I am probably going to repeat a little bit of what Kath has said and Maria has said and Bernadette have said too. I've been asked to speak about, I'm a presentation sister from Victoria. I've been asked to speak about the canonical consultor to the canonical delegate as a ministry. It is, for me, a great privilege to be asked at this stage in the story of and context of religious life to be a consultant. I really enjoy learning and I enjoy very much collaborating. And that's part of a ministry as I see it. It is quite a privilege. And for me, it's also continuing and seeing the evolving ministry of religious life especially here in Australia, in this Western world, and that we are responding to the changing circumstances. A number of religious congregations, including my own, are coming to completion and fulfilment, as we know. And we religious are continuing to live our life and our mission in this time, responding to call and mystery, as well as each of us choosing to be in this evolving mission and ministry at this stage in our lives, with opportunities as we age to be more reflective, to really exercise our care for one another, and to respond in ministry according to our unique spirit at this time in our congregation and in our life. So that background for me is important as I come to this role as consultor. I have an understanding of religious life, of its diversity, and I'm also aware that my role as a consultant is going to be for a short period of time, probably two, as I age, as we religious age. And it's wonderful to hear Kat's insight and to know that now the dicastery is permitting lay colleagues to be very much part of this. Over time, I've been also privileged to be part of the evolving story of EFCL, as many of us, I'm sure, as on these screens have been. Been able to see the developing role of EFCL, as well as the developing role and understanding of the Canonical Delegate and the Consultor. It's very much a hands-off role. This included commencing as a consultant to Maria, and so Maria asked that I could be a consultant with the Tasmanian Sisters in 2020-21, and my understanding is that the role itself has evolved and relates primarily to the CD. I possibly could have thought that it related to the sisters as well back in 2020. But it really relates particularly to the CD. And it's canonical and it's civil. So I can be consulted. I can also be asked for support and conversation with the Canonical Delegate in their role has been outlined by both Bernadette and Maria. It's very much a hands-off role. It's very much a high-level role, just to ensure that the sisters are cared for and that their wishes in their life and their mission are supported at this time. If consulted, I do want to have some understanding of the particular congregation. Being part of the presentation world, I'm really aware that while we presentation sisters share a spirit, we are quite different culturally. And we have our own life and our own story and our own wishes, our unique wishes to each congregation. So that includes living our religious life to the full, to completion, and with appropriate autonomy for our decisions, and that processes are respected by all. The religious life and living and wishes of each congregation are precious, as we know. And they need to evolve and be as each spirit and culture and as each wishes, hence the ministry. So I feel the privilege really to be involved in any way at this stage. I have personally valued learning on the journey, and Kath has outlined how Bernadette has gathered 4 consultors in this instance, for presentation groups across Australia. And we've learnt together. We've learnt more about the CD role, the Canonical Delegate role, and we've also learnt that our role is as support. Bernadette has also shared something of the documentation of each of the groups as that has been appropriate. So we are primarily to support Bernadette in her role, both at a canonical level for the care of the sisters and also at a civil level, and they each have a different form of civil governance. I feel rather privileged at this stage in my own life to share in this and to call on my own experience. I come to the role with leadership group experience in my own congregation. I have been a deputy to Maria, and hence I value being able to support Maria in her role. And recently, and over a number of years, I have had professional experience with civil governance, both on boards and companies, including the diversity as well as the developments in that civil space. Over time, my own congregation has experienced different forms of civil governance, as have I, including the development of the MPJPs. My experience in religious life and in ministry has always involved working with lay colleagues. As I indicated earlier, first experience of the role and beginning with EFCL was with Maria and another presentation congregation. With Bernadette's request, I have really appreciated learning of the developing role of the CD and consultants with lay colleagues. We have had, as Kath said, 3 meetings with Bernadette, and I can see that the role has evolved since 2020-21 quite significantly with the support of EFCL. I've appreciated learning of the developing role with other lay colleagues who are now taking on this consultor role. This is a development, as Kath says, that is now supported by the dicastery, which was not supported at the time that the Tasmanian sisters asked for a canonical delegate and consultor. And again, for me, it's a privilege to experience working with lay colleagues. It does say something about our church, the diversity within our church and experience of being church, particularly in this evolving synodal way. And it is absolutely collaborative. It is the future for us. And I think this, generally speaking, the PDs also that EFCL offer, including the Zoom meetings, does allow for lay colleagues to also learn of this role as we religious learn of the role at the same time. So it's been quite a unique experience, one that I really value as being church today. So thank you very much. I hand over now to Linda, I think.
Thank you, Nolene. It's my privilege just to conclude our conversation today. What we have done is actually mirrored the life of Emerging Futures. The number of times people have spoken around the concepts of collaboration, around emerging, around in which documentation has evolved, but ultimately it's around the value that we place on consecrated life and the women and men who support Emerging Futures, who are immersed in it, and the generosity in which the process is shared is absolutely amazing. The other piece that for me is really central in this process is the continuing way in which Emerging Futures is never stagnant. It's the input, it's the conversations, it's the requests, it's the queries, it's the confusion, it's the what's next that shapes the evolving nature of this ministry for religious life in Australia. But it's also been modelled that the richness of the people who engage in Emerging Futures, their generosity of sharing. We looked at Mary immediately holding up her little leaflet saying, if anyone wants this, please let me know. And I think that underpins both what was the vision, but the practicality. The generosity of members to share, to understand, to ask questions is really very important. So that collaboration and the underpinned by the dialogue and discernment that every group goes through continues to foster this emerging ministry for religious, by religious into the future. So on behalf of all members of the Emerging Futures Transition Team and operations, our board, our members, we are grateful for your continued support and for the generosity in being with us. And we look forward to continuing this conversation as we all watch with glued eyes to the next email from Sharon, which talks about what's the next evolution of Emerging Futures, what's the next invitation to participate, and what new insight am I able to contribute to develop. So on behalf of Emerging Futures, we thank you for your presence, and we conclude our Zoom this morning.